She convinced me to sign over our $350, $0 family estate, then lied about her affair with my best friend. But the real shock was discovering she'd secretly hidden a second property worth another $200, $0, and now she's fighting me in court for everything. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of what's happened. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off. My wife Lisa had always been a bit of a bitch, demanding, manipulative, quick to lie, but I never suspected she'd go this far. The signs were subtle at first, her phone buzzing more often than usual, her being overly secretive about her texts, and little things like her claiming she was too busy at work when I asked to spend time together. But I just chalked it up to stress or her being tired. Then one day, I noticed she was unusually defensive about our finances. Lisa had always managed the money. She was the financial genius in her words, and I trusted her completely. But lately, she'd been pushing me to sign over our estate, a $350, $0 family property we'd worked hard for. She said it was to secure our future, that we'd need the cash for emergencies, and that she'd handle everything. I was hesitant, but she convinced me with her typical bitchy tone, saying I was being paranoid and that she knew what she was doing. I signed the papers, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. What I didn't realize at the time was how much more there was to this story. I started noticing small discrepancies, receipts for trips I didn't know about, her secretive calls late at night, and her strange behavior around her phone. I also caught her lying more often. She'd tell me she was at work when I knew she was somewhere else. I remember one night catching her sneaking out of the house after I'd gone to bed. She was wearing different clothes, acting nervous. When I asked her where she was going, she snapped at me, saying I was paranoid and that I was reading too much into things. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was going through some old emails on her laptop, just trying to get a sense of her business dealings, and I stumbled upon a string of messages between her and my best friend Mike. The messages were flirty, suggestive, almost explicitly talking about how they couldn't keep their hands off each other. They'd been meeting up, sneaking around behind my back. The shock hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. My best friend, someone I trusted with everything, was sleeping with my wife. I froze. My mind was racing, trying to process how I hadn't seen the signs sooner. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. I felt like I'd been played for a fool. How could Lisa, who always acted so bitchy and demanding, do this to me? And Mike, how could my best friend betray me like that? I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I didn't even know how to start dealing with it. The worst part was knowing that Lisa had lied about everything. She told me she loved me, that she was committed, and that she wanted to build a future together. Meanwhile, she was secretly cheating on me with my best friend, and somehow convincing me to sign over our family estate, which she then used as leverage to keep me in the dark. I felt like I'd been played for a fool, and I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. That night I confronted her. I found her in the kitchen, acting like everything was normal. Her bitchy attitude was on full display as she shot me a cold glare and asked what was wrong. I threw the emails in her face and demanded an explanation. Her reaction was classic Lisa: denial, defensiveness, and outright lies. She told me I was crazy, that I was imagining things, and that I was overreacting because I was jealous. She said the messages were just flirting, that Mike was just a friend, and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. But I knew the truth. I'd seen enough to know that she was lying again. The way she looked at me, the way she brushed off my questions, it all pointed to one thing: she'd been lying for a long time. I felt my stomach turn at the betrayal, and I realized that my entire life with her was built on lies. The trust I had in her was shattered, and I didn't know how to move forward from this. All I knew was that I needed to get some clarity and decide what to do next. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and my mind kept replaying the moment I found out about the affair. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, betrayed by the two people I trusted most in this world. Lisa kept insisting it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything, and that Mike was just a stupid mistake she'd made out of boredom. She cried, she begged, she promised it was over and that she loved me. But I knew better. Love doesn't work like that when you're sneaking around with your best friend behind your husband's back. The next few days were a blur of anger and confusion. I started digging deeper into her phone, her emails, her bank accounts. I needed to see how far her lies went. That's when I discovered she had been hiding more than just her affair with Mike. Hidden in the back of her closet, I found a second property, an entire house worth another $200, $0. She kept it secret for months, maybe longer, and had been funneling money into it without my knowledge. I couldn't believe it. She lied about everything: our money, her fidelity, her intentions. I felt betrayed on a level I'd never experienced before. I had trusted her, given her everything, our family estate, our savings, my loyalty, and she'd thrown it all away. It was like she'd been planning this behind my back from the start. I remember the exact moment I realized how deep her deception ran. Her lying about the second property, trying to convince me she only had one house and that I was overthinking. When I found proof of the second property, I felt my blood boil. How could she keep something so huge hidden? I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with everything laid bare. I called her into the living room, showed her the evidence of the second property, and told her I knew everything. Her face turned white and her bitchy attitude disappeared for a moment, replaced by panic. She tried to deny it, claiming I was crazy, that I was paranoid, and that I was accusing her of things she didn't do. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen enough. I told her that. I was done playing her game. I told her I was going to take her to court and fight her for everything: our estate, the second property, and any other assets she'd been hiding. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she do this to us, to me, to our family? I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare and I was finally waking up. I knew I needed to get legal advice and prepare for a fight, but the thought of losing everything, the house, the savings, her, was almost too much to bear. In the days that followed, I started gathering evidence, talking to lawyers, and planning my next moves. I knew Lisa would fight me tooth and nail. She was a manipulative, bitchy woman who loved to twist things and blame everyone else for her mistakes. She painted herself as the victim, as if I was the one who betrayed her. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wanted what was mine, what we'd worked for, and I was ready to take her to court if that's what it took. The emotional toll was huge. I felt humiliated, angry, and utterly betrayed. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. I wondered if I should have seen it coming, if I should have pushed harder to find out the truth sooner. But mostly, I felt a deep sense of loss, loss of trust, loss of the life I thought I knew, and the loss of my best friend. The friend I trusted with my secrets, my dreams, my future. Now that trust was shattered, and I didn't know if I'd ever recover from it. I also knew I had to be careful. Lisa was a manipulative woman. She'd always been good at twisting words, at making herself look like the victim. I had to stay calm, gather solid proof, and stay focused on what I wanted: my money, my peace of mind, and my dignity. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. The fight was just beginning, but I was determined to see it through. I had to. For myself, for what little was left of my trust, and for the future I still hoped to salvage, even if it meant starting over from scratch. The legal process was a nightmare. Lisa fought me every step of the way, twisting her lies and throwing accusations around like weapons. She claimed I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. Her bitchy attitude was on full display in court, where she sat smug and dismissive, acting like she was the victim. But I had enough evidence: emails, bank statements, the deed to the second property, and I wasn't about to back down. She kept spinning stories about how it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd never cheated, that the second property was a gift from her parents, and that I was just jealous or insecure. She told the court she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt our marriage, and that I was just too insecure to handle her success. I could see right through her lies, but it was frustrating to listen to her bitchy tone, acting like she was the innocent party. Meanwhile, I was dealing with a flood of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd always thought Lisa was ambitious, maybe a little bitchy, but I never suspected she'd be capable of such lies and deception. The image of her sneaking around with Mike, the betrayal of trust, the fact that she'd secretly bought another house, these things haunted me. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I was so naive. I hired a good attorney and we built a solid case. I wanted my fair share, our estate, the second property, and the money she'd hidden. I knew she'd fight hard, but I was determined. I also started going through therapy, trying to process the emotional fallout. I felt like I'd lost not just my wife but also my best friend, the man I'd trusted with everything. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. One of the most shocking moments came when Lisa's lawyer brought up her emotional distress and claimed she was a victim of a cruel man who was controlling and paranoid. She played the victim card hard, crying fake tears and acting like I was the one who caused all her problems. It made me sick. I'd seen her lies, her manipulations, and her bitchy attitude firsthand. I knew she was good at spinning stories, but I refused to let her manipulate the court. The court hearings dragged on for months. Every time I thought I was close to understanding the full scope of her deception, she'd come up with some new lie or excuse. She claimed the second property was a business investment, that she was planning to rent it out, and that her affair with Mike was just sex, nothing serious. She insisted she loved me and wanted to save our marriage, but her words felt hollow. I'd heard her lie so many times I didn't trust anything she said anymore. Throughout all this, I kept feeling the emotional weight. The betrayal was relentless. I'd always believed that marriage meant honesty, loyalty, and trust, things she had shattered. I felt humiliated, angry, and broken, but I also knew I had to stay strong for myself. I couldn't let her win, not after everything. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine, and I had to find some way to rebuild my life. The court eventually ruled in my favor on most counts. I was awarded the estate, the second property, and the hidden funds she'd been funneling into her secret accounts. It wasn't a clean victory. Lisa was furious and she refused to accept the ruling easily. She threatened to appeal, to fight me in every way she could, but I knew I had done everything I could to prove my case. The betrayal, the lies, the deception, she had to face the consequences. Even with the court's decision, the emotional scars remained. I realized that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to fully repair. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had won the legal battle, but I knew I'd carry the pain of this betrayal for a long time. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get so far, how I'd become entangled with someone so manipulative and dishonest. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, but I also knew I couldn't change the past. All I could do now was try to pick up the pieces and move forward, no matter how hard that was. I learned a lot through this ordeal, about trust, about the importance of paying attention to the signs, and about how some people are capable of incredible deception. I also learned that revenge isn't always about revenge itself, but about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself. I don't wish this pain on anyone, but if there's one thing I can tell others going through something similar, don't ignore the red flags, trust your instincts, and fight for what's right. Because if you don't, you might wake up one day realizing everything you believed in was a lie. The aftermath of the court ruling was a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I finally had some closure, got back the money and properties she'd been hiding, but the emotional damage was undeniable. Lisa, of course, didn't take the loss well. She was furious, calling me every name in the book, accusing me of ruining her life and threatening to fight me in every way possible. Her bitchy attitude was on full display even now, as she insisted she was the real victim, that I had betrayed her first. I couldn't believe how manipulative she still was, even after everything. She refused to accept the court's decision without a fight. She hired a new lawyer, and suddenly she was claiming that I'd manipulated her into signing over the estate. She said I was controlling and that I'd pressured her into doing it. She even tried to spin it as if I was the one who was cheating all along, just projecting her own guilt onto me. It was classic Lisa, blame everyone else, never take responsibility. Her bitchy tone and manipulative tactics made me realize she was still trying to control the narrative, even after losing. Meanwhile, I was trying to focus on rebuilding my life. I started seeing a therapist, trying to process the betrayal, the anger, and the sadness. I felt like I'd lost a part of myself, my trust, my sense of security, and that feeling of having a partner who genuinely cared. Now, I was alone with my thoughts, questioning everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. It was hard to accept that someone I'd loved and trusted could lie so deeply and manipulate me for so long. I kept asking myself if I could ever truly forgive her, or if I should just move on. The financial repercussions hit hard, too. Losing the estate and the second property was a blow I hadn't fully prepared for. I had to sell some assets, cut back on expenses, and figure out how to stabilize my finances. It was a stark reminder that trust isn't just emotional, it's also financial. When someone manipulates and lies about money, it affects everything. I've been blindsided, but I knew I had to be smarter moving forward. I couldn't let myself be so naive again. Lisa's ongoing court battles dragged on for months. She kept filing appeals, trying to overturn the decision, spinning stories about how I lied and manipulated her. She even accused me of cheating, which was laughable considering the evidence I'd uncovered. I knew she was just trying to distract from her own guilt, but it still hurt. She's always been someone who loved to bitch and manipulate her way out of trouble, and even now, she refused to accept her role in all this. Her bitchy attitude and constant accusations made it clear she wasn't going down without a fight. The most shocking thing was how she tried to turn the community against me. She told everyone I was a controlling, jealous husband who'd driven her to do all these bad things. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I'd been abusive or manipulative, things I knew weren't true. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by some people I thought I could trust. It was like she was trying to rewrite history, to make herself look innocent while I was left standing there, the bad guy. That realization made me more cautious about who I trusted and how I presented myself. Despite all this chaos, I started focusing on myself. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and started to rebuild my confidence. I knew I'd never forget what happened, but I also knew I couldn't let her control my life anymore. The betrayal had shattered my sense of security, but it also taught me a hard lesson. Never ignore the warning signs, and trust is something you have to earn every day. I learned that sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones capable of the deepest lies, and you have to be prepared to fight for yourself. This process has been brutal, but I'm slowly learning to stand on my own 2 feet again. I still get angry sometimes, especially when I think about how Lisa lied, cheated, and manipulated her way through our marriage. But I also realize I'm stronger than I thought. I survived her betrayal, and I'm determined not to let her take any more. From me, the road to healing is long, but I'm ready to walk it. I want to rebuild trust in myself and find a way to move forward, even if it's without her. Because at the end of the day, I learned that the only person I can truly rely on is myself. And that's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. By now, I'd gone through enough to know that revenge, as tempting as it was, wouldn't bring me peace. Still, I couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of satisfaction knowing I'd fought hard and come out on top, legally, financially, and emotionally. But the scars of her betrayal lingered deep. Every time I saw her bitchy smirk or heard her spin her lies, a part of me wanted to lash out, to make her feel the pain she'd inflicted. But I knew that wouldn't fix anything. It would only make me look small, and I refused to be that person. Instead, I focused on my future. I started working on rebuilding my life from the ground up. I took a long, hard look at what I wanted, what really mattered. I realized I'd been so caught up in the idea of saving my marriage that I'd ignored my own happiness. Now I was determined to do things differently. I got a new job, one that paid better and challenged me. I started going to therapy regularly, trying to process everything, my feelings of betrayal, anger, sadness, and even relief. It was a lot to handle, but I knew I had to face it head on. The most surprising part was how much I started to enjoy my own company. I'd spent years giving everything to her, my time, my energy, my trust, and I realized I'd lost myself in the process. Slowly, I was reclaiming who I was before all this happened. I started exercising again, getting into hobbies I'd neglected, and reconnecting with friends I'd drifted away from. It wasn't easy, but I felt a shift happening inside me. I was finally taking control of my life, instead of letting her lies and manipulations define me. Legal battles still dragged on in the background, but I no longer felt the same desperation I had at first. I knew I'd won the fight for the estate and the second property, and I was proud of how far I'd come. Lisa's bitchy attitude hadn't changed. She still tried to spin stories, still played the victim, but I'd learned to see through her. Her constant accusations, her manipulative tactics, they no longer had the power to hurt me like they once did. I had my own sense of clarity, and I was finally starting to believe I could get through this. One thing that struck me was how much I'd underestimated the importance of trust in a relationship. I'd always thought love was enough, that honesty was a given. But now I knew that trust is something you build every day, and once it's broken, it's incredibly hard to repair. I also learned that revenge isn't about getting back at someone. It's about reclaiming your dignity and making sure you're okay. I didn't need to ruin her to feel better. I just had to focus on myself. Looking back, I realized this whole experience has changed me forever. I'm more cautious now, more aware of the red flags. I don't trust blindly anymore, and I refuse to settle for anything less than honesty and loyalty. It's hard to think I once believed that Lisa was the love of my life, but now I see her for what she truly was. Manipulative, bitchy woman who lied and cheated her way through our marriage. And I'm thankful I found out before it was too late. So if there's one thing I want to tell anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, listen to your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. And if you find yourself betrayed, don't let it define you. Fight for your peace, your money, your happiness, and most importantly, your trust in yourself. Because if you don't stand up for yourself, nobody else will. And trust me, surviving this mess has made me stronger than I ever thought I could be. I'm not perfect, and I still have bad days, but I know now that I'm capable of rebuilding, of starting over, and of moving on from a betrayal that once seemed impossible to overcome. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize how much I've learned about myself, about trust, and about what it really means to be betrayed. Lisa's lies and manipulations tore through my life like a hurricane, leaving destruction in their wake. But in the chaos, I found a kind of clarity I never had before. I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything, your trust, your financial stability, even your sense of security, to truly understand what matters. The biggest lesson I've taken away is that revenge isn't about hurting others or getting even. It's about reclaiming your power, your dignity, and your peace of mind. I didn't need to destroy Lisa to feel better. I needed to rebuild myself, piece by piece. I had to learn to trust again, but this time more carefully. I had to be cautious, not paranoid, and most importantly, I had to trust my instincts. Because if I'd listened to that little voice warning me all along, maybe I wouldn't have been blindsided by her lies. Looking back, I see now that her bitchy attitude, her constant lying, her manipulative ways, they were all signs I ignored for too long. I was too caught up in our life, too convinced that love was enough. But love, I've learned, is built on honesty and mutual respect. Without those, it's just an illusion, and I refuse to fall for that illusion again. I want real trust, real loyalty, and someone who values honesty over manipulation. This experience has made me stronger, more aware, and more determined. I don't hold any bitterness towards Mike anymore. He was just another victim of her lies. I've come to accept that some people are just capable of incredible deception, and that's a harsh reality I have to live with. But I also know that I control my future now. I can choose who to trust, who to keep close, and how to move forward. Most importantly, I've learned to forgive myself. I was naive, yes. I trusted her too much, and I let her manipulate me for too long. But I also realized that nobody is perfect, and falling for lies doesn't make me weak. It makes me human. What matters is that I got out, I fought for what was mine, and I refuse to be a victim anymore. Now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life, on creating a future where I'm the one in control. I've seen what betrayal looks like, and I've come out stronger on the other side. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about moving on, about healing and learning to trust again, but this time more wisely. I want to believe in love again someday, but I know now that it has to be based on honesty, loyalty, and respect. Anything less isn't worth it. So for anyone out there going through something similar, know this: you are stronger than you think. Don't let betrayal define you. Take back your power. Fight for your happiness, your money, and your peace of mind. Because if you do, you'll come out of it not just surviving, but truly thriving. And in the end, that's the real victory.